Hello?
Hey, Scott, Kevin here. I know we just finished recording a couple of shows, but I just realized that I forgot, God forbid, I forgot to cover the PCM review. And I tell you what, do you mind if I plug in our listener base and let them listen in on this phone call?
No, that's fine. We can do that. Luckily, you caught me just going into the shower, so I still have all my clothes on. That's a good thing.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Good. That would be a little too much info for most folks.
Yeah. It's a good thing no one's recording this.
No comment. All right. Hey, listeners, Kevin back here with Scott. Sorry if the audio quality on my end's not the great, but, iPhone 12s do work. They're not as good as our regular microphones, but they function. I apologize. I promised you in show 170, after we talked about the highway behavior of the new Wrangler Fix tuned PCM, that I was going to cover it off-road at the Sheriff's Jeep Fest. And
Yep.
I forgot. Sorry.
Sorry, we were in a hurry.
So anyway, this short little bit here, I'm just going to fill you in on it. And hopefully some color from Scott, since he was following in most of the rides in his Gladiator, as we talked about. He got to see the results of how the Jeep behaved from a power point of view on most of the trails. I'm going to start off with, it wasn't really any significantly different than it was on the highways. Idle was smooth. Throttle response was crisp. What was really nice with the smoothness was the fact that with the altered shift points, when I would come to an obstacle, and typically, I like to approach them, look at them, pick a line, and then proceed. I didn't have any problem with tire traction. And what I mean by that is, with the old PCMs, I would get a pretty sharp engagement on launch. I'd gotten used to that with no problem in first gear, but the shifts were firm. And the biggest problem came up on hill climbs when I would be going up a hill and need to apply more power because the transmission would already be into a lockout mode if I wasn't holding it in a lower gear, i.e. it would be in fourth gear with the torque converter lock. And the revised shift points that I could tell, and again, this is my supposition, please understand that I haven't had any information shared to me about the specifics of this special tune, but it allowed the transmission to release the torque converter lockup, and you'd have to press further to actually get a downshift. What does that mean off-road? Well, for me, it meant the tires never broke traction, not from the transmission shift. In the original transmissions, if I was bogging down and wanted to get the transmission to downshift on a slippery road or something like that, it would unlock the torque converter and downshift at the same time. And that sudden vroom kind of a jump, a lot of times broke the wheels free from the mud. And the next thing you know, instead of climbing, I was sliding. So that was a very, very pleasant surprise.
Right.
In the one case, and we hopefully have a video up by now of it, I was climbing a mud hill, and we talked about the fact that somebody had unlocked one of my hubs, essentially putting me in single-wheel drive, since I forgot to also lock in my diff locks. When that shift occurred, you can see it in the video. I'm going up the hill. Oops, I'm not going up the hill anymore. And oops, my tire is still moving forward, but the Jeep is actually sliding backwards. So needless to say, that had the potential to be a less than pleasant situation.
Yes. First you said it, then you did it.
Yeah, pretty much. And so otherwise, let's see, from an ECM point of view, my fuel mileage stayed fairly consistent. I did not see a major increase in fuel burn. Didn't necessarily see a major decrease, but considering that I was running around and idling all day long at low RPMs crawling these trails, didn't have any trouble with overheating that often comes with an over advanced ignition or, those kinds of things, excessive fueling that might, or excessively lean. Either one of them can cause your temperatures to go up. And had no problem with overheating. She stayed at a rock solid 195, even when we were running the air conditioner. The PCM itself, physically had no outward noticeable differences in terms of it wasn't hot, it didn't get cold, it didn't have any changes. It pretty much performed as a stock unit, just a little bit better.
Just that ever smidgen better.
Yeah, well, a little more than ever smidgen. But the other thing that on the highways, I mentioned in show 170 about the fact that when the torque converter unlocked, if I was still on a hill applying power, it didn't want to relock up till I either crested or let off the throttle. That was not an issue at the low speeds on the trail. She locked right back up again, allowing me to, probably that's where the increase in fuel economy came along. So I noted from a trail perspective, in my TJ, modified as it is, she was much smoother and much more, what do I want to say, controllable throttle response, which made the trail, as you saw, Scott, all of the stopping and turning and going around trees and the off cambers, throttle application was very, very, very smooth and predictable, which for me and the style of wheeling I do, that's a really nice fact.
Yes, 100%.
Any comments on your side, Scott, from the viewpoint?
Well, the main thing I was a little better to keep up with you in the Gladiator because, again, 8 speeds, another 100 more horsepower, and the fact that, I didn't have to, shift through the gears. But the interesting thing is that the exhaust note still, it seemed a little more crisper. And more than that, it seems like, again, I bogged down once, but even in the higher altitude, everything, it went flawlessly. Being behind you, I didn't smell a lean condition or a rich condition. It, like, everything, properly did its place. And again, easier to keep up with you, definly, for sure.
Yeah. But I don't think that was the PCM's point of view. I think that was the fact you were not driving a 3.8 JKU, but rather a 3.6 JT.
Yes, exactly. But even in my tired 4-liter with 170,000 miles on it, I definitely had to row through the gears to catch up to you. But again, it was, as always, though, it was fun because did you bring the second computer this time to the Jasper?
I brought it in a box just in case,
Mm-hmm.
And folks, not because I thought the Wrangler Fix PCM would fail, but if there was some negative performance aspect, I was ready to swap back to the other one and do a 1-for-1 comparison. But I never had a hiccup.
No.
It ran exactly as well as no, it's not a fake. It ran better than the stock PCM ever did. It behaved better is a better way to think of it.
Right.
We're not talking about the same changes if you turbocharge or supercharge or nitrous, with that huge blast of power. That's not what this tune did. What this tune did was take care of those niggling little things that Chrysler left in the older series 4-liters in terms of the PCM performance, with the TCM performance, idle fuel mixtures, air balances on the engine side, shift points, torque converter lockups, upshift, downshift points. All of those appear, and I've got to say it that way, to be modified slightly. Just like in some cases, use the torque converter lockup. I talked about that. It used to come on early, and it didn't want to release until you really put your foot into it. Now It comes on at a much more reasonable RPM, in my opinion, on the power curve of the 4-liter, and releases much easier to let you have that little bit of additional power on a hill climb without dropping all the way down a gear, having that jolt to your system. So really, to me, it's
a more pleasurable driving experience.
It is. It just made the driving experience that much nicer.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? Maybe Mark will be willing to come out with a fire-breathing I don't know. And folks, I'm not putting that bug in Mark's ear. But I do want to say thanks so much to Wrangler Fix in this show for asking me to test this computer. It was, once you get into a multiple generational old Jeep Wrangler, I'm at least 3 generations back now.
Right.
And it's not a whole lot of new development for these things.
Yeah.
And the fact that Wrangler Fix has kind of gone out on a limb here and said, well, there's a big group of people still running the 4 liters.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than just fixing the known problems, to be able to tweak it a little bit, to smooth it out, to sweeten up the operation, it's great. And Mark, if you're listening to this show, thanks for asking me to set it up. And we'll talk later. I don't know if I want to send it back. I may have to ask you what you want for it.
Well, he's always been very good to us, and again, it's one of those things that me personally, if I wanted someone to test something or a product, or I would want you to be doing, because you will give the honest feedback, because A, you have the engineer talk good, and also two, you know what you're talking about. Now, if you want to talk about a hot sauce, okay, I'm your engineer for the hot sauce, But
this is true.
That is very true.
Mister, I almost burned my gut out. Anyhow.
Yeah, no, I was actually at lunch today, and I had some crazy sauce, and I'm like, I put it on a French fry. Okay, this is just mayonnaise with some spicy. Okay, we're good. It wasn't the flatline death sauce. But I learned my lesson on that day. But no, again, a big thank you to Mark for that, because again, sometimes when you take the beta test stuff on multiple out-of-state trips, it can be kind of scary on some aspect, but at the same time, having the backup is always a good thing.
Yeah, we put it on the good run. We used it locally, and as we reported way back in the beginning, it ran fine locally. You run into the grocery store, run into the parts store, going out and playing in the creek, behind the barn, kind of things like that. And then, on a long road trip, not a whole lot of wheeling, but a lot of highway miles with some pretty good cargo in the Jeep.
Yep.
And a significant elevation change. So we went from sea level into probably about 3,000 feet, and never a hitch, never a hiccup. Sometimes tunes can be a little finicky on elevation changes.
Yeah.
And this one was really mild enough that it compensated well. And then we turned around and we stuck it into the mountain trails, into the mud, where I was going from crawling at a dead idle to wide open throttle, going up a muddy hillside for an eighth of a mile, trying not to slide off into the trees. So,
this might be a question some people have to ask.
Yeah.
Are you using 93, 87, 89? What kind of octane you use?
Plain old regular. I decided I was going to test it as hard as I could.
Okay.
So I was down into just Bucky's Bucky's regular, no mid-grade, no premium. Although I used to run premium with the old PCM, not because of the knock, but it helped the rough idle. It helped smooth it out a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I had a smoother idle on regular, which saves me like 50 plus cents a gallon.
Oh, yeah.
So there is that side to it that we never mentioned before. But yeah, we started off on premium when we went up to Tennessee, and then we went to a mid grade and we checked the mileage on that. And then we went to a base grade, and in fact, the mileage went up with the lower grade fuels, and that makes sense from an engineering. And contrary to most people's belief, there's more energy in regular than there is in premium. Premium's actually premium because it doesn't pre-detonate, doesn't knock and ping, but it does that by taking out some of the energy of the fuel,
right,
making it less combustible. All right. So there's actually more BTUs in regular than there is in premium. If you can run regular and run it well, you can actually squeeze. And we did go up from about 13.8 to almost a tick under 15. And the funny thing was the 13.8 was on the flatlands, and the 14.9 was running up and down the mountainsides of Georgia and Tennessee.
Yeah.
So anyway, listeners, we'll return you to your regularly scheduled podcast at this time.
Yes.
And you know what? Keep an eye out on our Facebook page. Maybe if I can get some time in the next couple of weeks, I may do a quick viddy. Boy, Scott, I'm no better on the phone than I am.
You're doing it now.
A video summary of this, and kind of let you see the PCM inside and see what the Jeep, maybe some snippets of the adventures that we had. So anyway, we look forward to that.
I also did think of another video we could do, let the listeners share with us, and the dogs are here. But what if we did a video of what the tools we carry on the trail?
Okay. Well, you can clip this part out of the podcast if you want. Yeah, no problem, because that did come in handy on the trail. Doing a full shifter repair, on the side of the trail again.
Now I'm gonna leave it in, the dogs barking and everything, because that just adds the authenticity of the Gunner the Trail dog barking in the background. Okay. I may or may not leave it in. I don't know. I'll decide on that. But on that note, because he's not going to stop talking. Hold on. Let's give it a second.
All right, Jeepers. Well, appreciate you listening into this little supplemental section, and apologize that I forgot it. Doing 2 shows back to back because, as we mentioned, with all the travel, I wanted to make sure you got a show. We're trying not to ever break our pattern of every 2 weeks. So, as we say at the ending of the show, thanks for listening. We're going to lock ups, put her in 4 low, and hit the trail. Bye.
Bye.
You're listening to a 4x4 Radio Network podcast.
Hi, Jeepers. Welcome to another exciting, adventure, action-packed episode of On the Trail with Kevin and Scott. That's right, show 171. We're still rocking and rolling and getting things done. Right, Kevin? Okay, and remember, with that burst of energy, that excitement, that ability to take Jeeping by the horns and go, yeehaw! I am Scott. I'm the slapstick parts guy, and I continue a mission to derail poor Kevin's train of thought. I actually said that right. Woohoo, go me. And directly across from me is my co-host and good friend and partner in this adventure called this podcast, Kevin. How are you?
Folks, I'm Kevin, the engineer. As I say every show, I'm the guy who reads instructions, uses the right tools, and most of the time I'll actually follow the instructions. Occasionally I might be tempted to veer off if I figured something out that I want to do different.
Yay!
And this is kind of part 2 of the last podcast.
The debriefing. But we're keeping our briefs on. But before we get into that, remember, while we share what always works for us and what didn't, it's always up to you to do your research, read the instructions, and please follow them.
Yeah.
And I'm doing this without notes, kids. I think I finally got it.
Yeah, it only took 6 years.
Shoot.
He said the right word. So he's even better than he was. Thought he was. So anywho, we're going to start off, as you know, the last show we talked to you in depth about the Great Smoky Mountain Jeep invasion, which was an absolutely awesome trip. And as soon as we got back,
it was back to reality.
Yeah, the first thing out of Scott's mouth was, I got to get the winch on before we go to Georgia.
Okay, in my defense,
which was less than 7 days away.
Was it less than 3?
I know.
The worst part was that I like spatial awareness and what was the other thing? It's like combat awareness, spatial awareness,
situational.
Thank
awareness.
you, situational awareness. I'm like, I got months. Jasper's not till September.
It's September.
Crap, it's September. So I'm like, okay, well, now I got to get this done. And so I go ahead, I got my doctor's appointment,
Yeah.
I got a byline for a quick second. My doctor's appointment. I made an appointment for the DMV to do something. I made it for the same day my doctor's appointment that I forgot about, that I knew I had to do, but I didn't get the lab work done because I was too busy getting a winch on the Jeep. And I realized, oh, crud, my doctor's appointment's in September. It's September. Oops. So again, I'm a little squirrely lately, but my adventure was eventually we were going to flat tow the Gladiator or the LJ because that's why we got the lift on. Yay, it's done. Yay, I'm still riding that high. But the other thing too is, it didn't really work out that way because of, buying the
tow bar assembly,
tow bar and brake and all that stuff. Just became, we're going to drive the Gladiator. Okay, let me see if I can get a lift installed in the Gladiator. Nope. Don't have time. So we decided to put the winch on, have a sense of recovery.
And byline, folks, I'm sitting there going, great. He's going to go up in his unlifted, stock. It just has different tires and wheels on it, Gladiator. And he's always been one of these parking at the back of the parking lot, turn sideways so that people can't open their doors into his pretty little truck.
Wow.
And I'm going, we're going to go off road. And he's not going to be able to go around a tree because we are going up where there's trees.
I do have an aversion to door dings.
Yes,
I do.
That's an understatement, Scott.
But when we had one door ding 3 weeks before we had the armor put on the JK, we had a door ding on the driver's door. And even though it was a small little dent, it looked like the door was ripped off to me, okay? I'm trying to avoid this, but now that I have the side armor, I'm a little better about it.
You were, and we'll get to that, but it was just one of those where I was just giving you the listeners my first reaction, going, okay, I'm sitting here in the equivalent of the helicopter of Jeeps. I go anywhere I want. I turn which way I need to, and I'm going, okay, you were doing 27-point turns in a JKU, and you now have a JT.
We're going to stick a pin in that.
We are, aren't we?
We are going to stick a pin. It wasn't as bad as a 17-foot turn radius on Project Skunkworks I can't talk about.
Yes.
But the interesting thing was time to get this winch installed. That also had been on the bench for a year. So it was time to do it.
It'd been in my shed for half a year.
And it was kind of a bittersweet moment because that was the last thing Dory and I bought together. Mm-hmm. But, it's time to put it on. It's time to be my Jeep.
Yep.
So I went ahead and got the bronze, got rid of the red tow hooks. So we bylined with that. But the most important thing is, and there's a picture on the Facebook page to prove I read instructions.
Yeah. Upside down in a foreign language, as was noted by several of them. I will say, I didn't put any comments there because I'm letting the Facebook world have fun with it, is that the backdrop is actually my garage, not Scott's.
Yeah.
We did this install in Lithia. But it was an interesting one because somebody had to change out his tow hooks. We extended the process by a significant amount of time.
By at least an hour.
Oh, every bit of an hour to take off.
And I still have the rear tow hooks to do. Yes. I think I'm just going to paint those in place.
So anyway, we had some fun. It was a Warren winch with a Warren winch kit for the JT JLs. Its instructions were adequate. Probably wouldn't go much better than adequate.
No.
There was a couple of steps in there that were a little misleading. I will tell you, if you choose that kit from Warren, it's a good kit. Please don't take that wrong, but the instructions were just make sure. The easiest thing I would tell you is take pictures of all the underbelly bracket locations of things like skid pans and that stuff before you take them off.
Not living that down.
No, we're not. Okay. You take out 4 bolts and you end up, there's more stuff. The instructions don't tell you that certain plates for their kit go underneath the bracket that you just took off. Nowhere does it say that you put the bracket back up through that,
And we were reading words and the correct languages.
Yes, and going back and forth, and finally had to just kind of use spatial awareness to go, okay, this has to hold that part. That doesn't fit without this.
But there's 2 bolts here, nuts.
Yeah, and
liberal application of grinder, not anymore.
Oh yeah, that was the worst one. Was the factory brackets that came off had apparently 2 accessory welded on nuts that were unused, but they were where we were supposed to put it between the new Warren bracket. And so there's been a lot of comments on the Facebook page. Photographs do show a little distortion. They don't show you depth because everybody's like, you're grinding that off and you're sending sparks into your Jeep, 2 Jeeps. No, they were not anywhere in the spark line. Appreciate the concern, but no, they were fine.
And I have to give George a joke because we posted it here. There's that meme going around with the one golfer like Tiger Woods looking very prim. The one guy looks like Santa Claus on Florida vacation, and he put on there saying, slightly altered, and it had the prim and proper golfer. And then Scott's projects was the Miami Santa, and I'm like, that was actually kind of funny. Because that's pretty much how it comes out to be. So thank you, George. I appreciate that. But we got things done, and it was funny because we're going to stick a pin in this. I was literally, because we were having so much trouble with these brackets, I'm like, you know what, Kevin, forget it. We're just going to put the 6 bolts on up front. That's going to be adequate. It'll be fine. Nothing bad will happen. And Kevin, to his words,
no, we're doing it right. Or you're not going home, kind of a discussion.
And finally, I'm like, all right, gee whiz, I'm never going to regret this situation. Cough.
So we did sort out the brackets. Like I said, it just took a little bit of trimming on some factory ones. Not even trimming; it's just cutting off some staked on nuts that weren't being used. And then we did, for those that want to know, we did repaint the brackets, so we didn't put them up there to rust. And I'm sure different models probably with those under brackets. They supported some of the belly skid plates over the sway bar disconnect and the steering system. You can see a little short pictographic of me sitting there. The other thing that came up was apparently the winch had been drop damaged somehow. The ground bolt that you have to connect to on the motor case, the threads were all bunged up.
Yeah.
And we didn't have time to ship it back for under warranty.
Because the warranty was already up.
Well, that too. What you see is a picture of me sitting there. All you see is my knees and my hands sitting on my knees. And in them are a file and a tap. Mm-hmm. And behind them, you can see the silver stud that was mutilated. And a little bit of filing to get things started, and then chased everything down with a tap. And lo and behold, it's fixed.
Well, you forgot one important step.
What that?
A liberal application of sailor words.
Yeah, I was. What I was going through was not subject for.
Scott was mad. Scott was worried Kevin was going to throw things like me.
Let's see. But anyway, it was kind of a fun install. I will tell you this: that kit. I got to ask Warren. Come on, guys. Could you have made it a half inch further forward?
Yeah.
The cables were literally jammed up against the grill, the plastic grill guard, or the grill itself. And I had to come up with a little bit of a rub isolation thing, zip tied to the wires. And a half an inch would have allowed those cables to make it not rub on the grill. That's my only complaint. I can't really say too many things about that. The other thing that we did change out was the fair lead. It's a really nice black fair lead along with a new plate behind it that fills the license plate dent. And but the bolts that we were supposed to reuse from the factory didn't reach through everything.
Yeah.
And they probably would have worked other than there's a slight curvature to everything, and the curvatures didn't all match till you tighten it down. It was kind of like springy. And we couldn't even get a thread to start. So quick run up to Ace, and we got some CAD plated grade 8s.
That matches everything.
And it's close enough to his bronze.
Yes.
That it looks like he's got two little bronze bolts.
Exactly.
Even though they're really CAD plating, which we all know is gold.
Hush.
Or excuse me, golden in color. But whatever, whatever. So that was kind of the lead up. And of course, I'm running around with things like I found my parts, as I mentioned on the last show, and got my bushings for my side step. So I ripped the side step off the TJ. Because I was helping somebody else, I didn't have as much time as I thought I would have. So I was like, well, let me just replace the one bum bushing. And with a little bit of trimming and fettling, as the Brits would say, everything went back in, the snap ring went on, and my step performed perfectly the entire trip. No failures, no popping of pins, and no hanging step.
Yes.
In this case, the trails, it would have been a bad thing to have it fall down.
Yes.
But I did still take my duct tape.
Well, it's one of those things you have to put inside the tool bags.
Yeah, you do. You do.
I do want to make a quick little sidebar here.
Yep.
Since this show, since we did this show, and I talked about my third brake light, blinky lights.
Oh Lord!
Holy cow! I did not realize that many people had an affection for blinky stoplights and the bumper that match OEM stuff because they are OEM. I was so literally it blew up on the Gladiator page. I'm like, okay, I have to sit here and go and I had to go do a quick video on how we installed it, how we did it, and then of course Project Skunk Works I didn't realize was in the background, so of course that caught traction. I'm trying to explain that, and then so everything else going around, but I didn't realize everyone would love that so much. I was like, holy! I was kind of.
We talked about it on this show.
We talked about it on the first show when we just did the Blinky thing, and that was it.
Yeah.
Project Blinky, not to be confused with Project Binky.
Yeah.
But
which is cool in its own right over in England.
Oh, absolutely. And then while we were at the event, you kept telling me, like, when I was trying to park, everyone kept staring at my bumper.
Oh yeah.
I was like,
we one of the trail rides ended at something called the Venue, which is a building, and he's backing into the parking lot and stopping, and of course every time he hits the brakes and then backing into this location, the lower lights were going off and people were going, "What's that? Oh, what? Hey, did you see that?" And I'm like, "Oh boy, here we go again."
Pretty much.
So,
but so anyways, let's so we got the Jeep back together. We loaded in and we hit the road. At least we did. You did too on Wednesday.
Yeah. On Wednesday, you were coming up from the East Coast. I was coming up from the West Coast. I never did find out. How did you cut across? Did you go across 10 or
10?
Okay, so you cut across down low.
You know what's really interesting? All these years, I've been taking 10 to 301, coming down 301. It's back to 75 in near Gainesville. Mm-hmm. I didn't know for another 30 more miles on 10, I could pick up 75.
Yeah.
I was like, are you kidding me? All these years I've been adding all these miles. So anyways, I feel comfortable about talking about it now. I have someone in my life. Mm-hmm. And this person is not used to having long car trips because they had a really bad accident being rear-ended on the interstate. And so we decided to take 2 days up to see how it goes. And we stopped off. I tried to find the same hotel that we stayed at in Macon. Yep, missed that. So
we stayed in the bypass loop.
We didn't take exactly. So I ended up in Macon, but like East Macon, I guess.
Well, actually, Central Macon.
Yeah.
Central North Macon. That was the funniest thing when we were talking about in the next morning where we're going to try and meet up. Mm-hmm. But you guys had already left. But you kept talking about, well, I'm going to come back around to you. Why? When he explained where he was, I says, no, just keep going north. You've already gone through Macon. Why would you backtrack through Macon to take the bypass around Macon?
Because sometimes I'm not too bright. Come on, I saw my first firefly ever while we were on the phone. I mean, come on.
Oh, yeah, and he freaked out.
I thought it was really cool. But
it is.
I'm still, if you guys know out there in podcast land which muscle I'm supposed to flex to make my butt glow like a firefly, please let me know. Because you have any idea how much money I'll save in flashlights? You know?
Yeah, but then never mind. You'll be looking out your...
Who says I don't now? Duh. But no.
Okay.
So, anyways, as everything's considered, the trip up was rather nice, and again, we got there on Thursday, and that was actually kind of cool to get up there, and we stayed in a different kind of area.
Yeah.
But a couple things that were interesting was the fact of that, we were supposed to get cooler weather.
Yeah.
That was kind of nice, but
we didn't.
Again, that was nice that the theory was going to happen. But like other trips before, we had certain things we wanted to do. But while we were in the Jeep, and this is one of the funny things, I got to cover this is because almost like a garage segment in itself. If you have a JL or Gladiator, you know about our sun visors. Mm-hmm. They break, they shatter, they come off, and it's just terrible. And of course, I'm bringing the visor down and moving it for somebody, and it breaks, and they go, well, I'm glad it broke on you, not on me, because now I don't feel so bad. I'm like, oh, man. So there are clips on Amazon that you can buy that will reinforce that, fix it, and if it hasn't broke yet, we'll keep that from happening. So I did purchase those, so I will update everyone when I get them to how well they fixed the problem. So like I said, if you have a Gladiator or a JL, you know what I'm talking about with those sun visors, because that is not a fun time.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. So we both left on Wednesday. And on Thursday, we cruised on up and in. We rented a small condo. Well, I guess it wouldn't be considered small. It's 3 bedrooms, but it really wasn't as far as the things up in the community called Big Canoe. Some of you in that area know well what I'm talking about. It's a closed, gated mountain top community where the roads themselves would qualify as a moderate trail in many locations. In Florida, they'd probably be considered extreme. You come up the mountain and your stop sign and you're hanging there at a 35-degree incline waiting for traffic to go by where you're looking under their cars as they go past. And then you get to pull out into that.
No joke. I hit the off-road pages on the Gladiator, and it has all the gauges and a
inclinometer.
Well, a height.
Oh,
and literally going up that one mountain road, it was going by 8 feet increments. So for every 3 feet, it was going up almost 8 feet. Yeah. It was insane the amount of because we would look down and be like 1850, 1852, 1859, I was like, whoa, we are going up high.
By the way, folks, this is the same place we stayed several years ago where they were burning up clutch bands in the automatics in the JKUs.
One of the things I had, the temperature on the transmission never went above 190.
Well, that's good.
Engine coolant went to 226. But, transmission temps, I was keeping an eye on that like an eagle.
So let's see here. We actually Thursday went down and registered, which really was just going into Jasper proper and picking up our stickers for the windows. The actual event field wasn't open, although we drove right past it. You could see them out there vendors still setting up and all that. Weather was pretty nice. And we just kind of moseyed around town on Thursday. Friday dawned, and kind of looking at the weather, we're like, we need to make the most of Friday while we can.
Yeah.
The downside, Friday only had 2 trails open. One was called Grandview, and the other one was called The Venue. Mm-hmm. We did both. Grandview was listed as a easier trail, and it was for the most part. But it kind of depends. It was interesting this year because I've been going to the Sheriff's Jeep Fest for years, and other than the last 2 years between COVID and other things that happened with the podcast this time last year. So whoever's rating the trails has changed, and my only comment to them, it's not negative, but it's their frame of reference has changed. Easy used to mean basically a stock Jeep could go through there.
Yeah.
Now easy is if you have at least all-terrain tires, a mild lift, and recommend a winch kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And so easy wasn't really what I would say the general world would call easy. Mm-hmm. They were more of a moderate. If you're a skilled wheeler, yes, it was easy. Yeah. No question about it. But any of the newbies that were there were coming back going, my word, what's a moderate or an extreme? Yeah, well, the extremes really were. And that's fine. I mean, it's just understand that this event has kind of changed its trail rating system a little bit. We had fun. The easies were relatively easy for Scott and I.
Well, they even had a couple spots where the gladiators were not allowed.
Correct. Well, and that was mainly because of your overhang on the rear. Mm-hmm. And one that almost should have been marked that way on Grandview. Wasn't it Grandview or was it Venue that got you?
No, actually, well, as far as the overhang goes, the second trail is where I El Kabonged.
Oh, that's the Venue. So we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah. But the first trail, I honestly,
there were some tree challenges there.
Well, we're gonna back up for a second because I never had the Gladiator in 4-wheel drive. No, it wasn't until the day I installed the lift that while Kevin was at Ace Hardware getting some stuff, I threw the Gladiator in 4-wheel drive.
Back pasture.
His back pasture, and said, okay, things are working good. We're good to go, But, because again, it wasn't it was Dory's.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, so here I am, like everyone's I had 2 people in XJs behind me, trail rigs going, check out the new guy, with the Gladiator on SST Coopers, with gold wheels. Broad, so I felt very self-conscious, like I got a perfectly capable, Jeep back at the house, sure, whatever, but no, I'm like, okay, so here we go. So I put the Jeep in 4-low. Now, bear in mind, my last point of reference, again, besides wheeling the LJ that little bit, was wheeling the JK. Mm-hmm. And, the JK was 27-point turns everywhere. Yeah. It doesn't matter where you try to turn. And when we started getting a little tight, I started panicking. And the first turn, and of course, we had the handheld radios, I overshot, back up, and there goes Kevin. That's one. I'm like, oh, really, dude? Come on. But it only took me 2 turns, and I got through it. Yeah. But what was interesting is that this was the first trail. I started getting the feel for it almost instantly.
You did. It came quickly.
It came very quickly back. And then I will say the one of the hill climbs we did where, person next to me was like, are they going to make it? Because this wasn't the big one where you came back down. It was another one. And you went up the climb and, she saw how you were going up there and she's like, are we going to be okay? I'm like, yeah, we have the wheelbase. Again, I was already in, 4-low. And I went up that climb, and it felt planted. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel like I had any danger of anything going on. And I want to say that I pretty much stayed on your 6 almost the whole time, except for the one area where another climb you did. We'll
put a video up of that climb. Yeah. That was on orders. He didn't get too close to me.
Yeah. But the interesting thing was that Gladiator did not skip a beat. It made me look good.
Well, longer wheelbase. If you're one of those people who've had longer wheelbases, I've had plenty of the pickup trucks and things, 4x4s, and because your primary engine balance is that much further from your rear wheels, you have a bigger lever arm keeping your front end planted. The shorter the wheelbase, the more weight transfer you sense going to your rear wheels, which gives that front end that floatier feeling and you less security.
The light steering and everything.
Trust me, I know. So, I was, to be honest with you, it looked really good. And I was kind of watching you squeak through trees. And that's what happened to me the one time I was watching you squeak through trees, and I didn't.
We'll get to that in a second.
Didn't do any damage, folks, but it was one of those, quarter mile an hour. Boom. Oh, okay. So even I had to back up once, but that was mostly due to inattentive.
Yeah. Well, as we're looking through, she's like looking at me and she goes, "There's marks in these trees." I'm like, "That's where people have hit trees." What? Because this is our way home.
Yes.
And she's like, "Are you worried?" I'm like, Nope. So I followed your line, remembered how it was, taking the turn wide and coming in early, like the JKU. And next thing you know, I'm like, I'm making it look so easy
because you greased it through.
I felt confident, and I part of me wanted to have a lift installed before I went. But we always talk about getting to know your rig before you lift it and doing everything. And that happened for a reason. Now that I've done that, I feel so much more confident now that when I get the lift, my skills, I was quickly to shake the rust. Now, I'm not going to say I'm not going to have a boo-boo.
Yeah.
It's going to happen because it's off-roading.
It is.
But when we got to some of those other more gnarly areas, I did have one complaint, and that was in the one big hill climb on the second try. I know I'm skipping a little ahead.
Yeah.
But the engine bogged down and didn't downshift.
Yeah.
And I wasn't about to keep my foot out of it because I was already committed. And
you would have been a long way to back down a hill
with a very long truck.
Yeah.
And so, but it still it bit down and gritted its teeth, and I never had to use my lockers once. And
folks, let's sidebar a second here. One of the things, and I know a lot of people are going, "Well, what'd you put it in 4 low for?" I don't do 4 low. I don't do this. I get it. But I believe I'm one of those people who says, there's a reason you have a transfer case. There's a reason you have lockers. There's a reason that you have low ranges. And it's not to get you out of situations. It's to prevent you from getting into them. So a lot of these trails were damp and they were slippery. And 4 low gives you power on demand as well as engine braking like nobody's business with all 4 wheels. Yeah. So I tend to run most of my trails in 4 low. Now, you get me into sand, I'll go into 4 high, and occasionally even 2-wheel drive to meet the materials. But that's my choice. I'm not telling you have to wheel that way, but that's what I was doing, and Scott chose to follow suit for that reason. So I'll just get off that little sidebar, but so you understand, because I hear a lot, I made it all the way through in 2-wheel drive. Okay, then why do you have a 4-wheel drive?
Yeah.
That's the reason. I don't understand, and I'll be honest, I'm a little confused when people think that's really cool to get through on 2-wheel drive. You have 4-wheel drive so that you don't destroy your truck. When you're in 2-wheel drive and off terrain, in rough conditions, you're hyper-loading that rear axle and all that rear gear train, taking all the load, all the forces through that one drive shaft. You have 2. If you use 2, you're going to share that shock load. And you might not blow up the rear end. You might not break the wheel bearings because you spread out the thing. But, of course, your Jeep, your choice.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pluses and minuses to everything. Like sometimes, like I would put, and I got good at shifting the Gladiator in and out of 2-wheel-drive because the one thing I will say with the Gladiator, it does get that bind when you turn the wheel sharply, and I had to turn those wheels sharply. So it would be into 2-wheel-drive, make the turn, back into 4-wheel-drive. Because I kept having that bind, and that might be the reason why I made those turns so well. But again, it was an exercise in me going to and from 4 low and 4 high.
Oh yeah, you need to learn what your Jeep can do and how it can do it. So that's fantastic.
And I was super impressed with everything. And even when we got to the second trail, I was outpacing there was a JKU behind me on 40s and 1 tons, and they were scoffing at me pretty much, like, get this guy out of my way. I want to do some rear wheeling. They were making the 3 and 6 point turns.
Yep.
I was scooting right in the first turn.
Well, those 1-ton axles don't have the same turning radius.
Yeah.
They could be adjusted, but it's kind of hard with 44s to get them to tuck in tighter.
Yeah.
So we went on, we finished that first one up kind of as a warm-up because obviously both of us have been on limited, real short, sandy Florida trails for almost 2 years, given COVID and everything else that's gone on in life. And I'm not a fool. I don't jump right back into the deep end without making sure I can do a couple laps in the doggy pool.
Yeah.
So,
with Gunner staring at you, hey, get out of my pool, human.
Yeah, exactly. So both of those runs went well. And we got on over to Venue and decided to take the Venue. And it's interesting. It is a venue. It's a building being built to have weddings in and to retirements and, all kinds of get-togethers and shindigs. And somebody went out there and they took a dozer and they basically made a trail. And what you had was the raw cuts of the dozer wherever they chose to push the trees and move things around. So it was a very raw trail, if you know the term. It means it wasn't improved. It didn't have wheel ruts cut into it. It just had some rain washes a few places. It went up and down no less than 3 mountain ridges, crossed over a couple of 2 or 3 water crossings, had 4 pretty aggressive verticals, and fairly long verticals. I'd probably say at least an 1/8 of a mile vertical run at anywhere from a 30-degree inclination to upwards of a 45 on one of them, which we'll talk about in a minute. It was, it dove into really green, dense foliage areas that you were shaded and popped you out on top of rocky ridges. It was a lot of fun, and it was long.
Yeah.
We were on it almost 2 hours.
Yeah, the GoPro gave out after 45 minutes.
It gave out, and it was Friday. It wasn't crowded. Yeah, there were some other people there, and every once in a while we'd come up on somebody else, but we could hang and wait a minute, and they'd go, and then nobody'd be bumping up and sniffing up the gladiators. But, occasionally somebody'd tuck up. There were 3 extreme lateral trails that popped off, so you had your choice. We didn't go those because they weren't offering them to the JTs, and I really didn't want to separate from Scott at that time.
Yeah.
And I don't, my wife's not fond of the extreme trails, so we just, we played on as best we could from, a few little sections here and there. Let's see.
Well, the one climb you did was very interesting because, again, my person next to me, we watched you go up, and this was a long
it was
climb.
a long straight.
Now, again, I thought you were going to make it because you had everything done, but you said, sometimes we forgot.
Well, yeah, there's 2 things that went wrong. I didn't tell you what I found out afterwards.
Oh, what'd you find?
Yeah, somebody messing around at one of the sites had unlocked one of my hubs. It's the downside, and this is another sidebar, a little bit of rant on Kevin's. You see a Jeep that's got manual locking hubs, it is not funny to move one from lock to free.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't either, but we heard it banging up front because one side was locked and one was not. And it's flat out, you don't know what serious problems you're going to put the person in. And you can say, well, you should check them every time you leave. I got it, but you shouldn't mess with somebody else's Jeep. That's just low. And if you're listening to this podcast and you did it to a little black Jeep up in Jasper,
stop listening.
Get your hands off everybody else's Jeep. It's not funny. 2, it cost me a hill climb, and fortunately, I was a pretty good ways up on a muddy slope and lost traction and began, and the front end started hunting, and we locked up the brakes. And I'm like, thought I'd broke something. And of course, what happens when you stop in the middle of a muddy hill?
You slide down.
You start sliding backwards. So I was fortunate, was able to steer it down the hill, rolling it and get at the bottom and then reach in. I had the other problem is that I hadn't engaged my rear locker or my front. I didn't know that the front hub was undone. So I went ahead and punched in the lockers. That was my mistake. I should have punched them in, knowing that hill climb was muddy. And I went on up, but even as I went up, the front end was making funny noises, particularly when I got to the top and had to kind of turn to get off the top of the trail. And it wasn't until a little bit later that I got out and looked, and it was like, did I blow the hub? I thought maybe that I had shocked the hub and it had exploded and the knob had just moved. No, it turned, click, turns fine. It locks in, locks out. Just somewhere along the line, somebody had unlocked my hub. Now, this isn't the first time this has happened. It's happened at other events. And I love manual hubs, but I hate, nosy people that mess it up. I feel like I want to get little caps that go over the thing so they can't tell that they have a knob on them.
Yeah, you just put a big, like a grease pin.
No touchy.
Or a smile you're on camera sticker.
Yeah. To that end, it was an interesting climb, okay, because basically without my diffs locked or one of my front hubs locked, I was going up pretty much in two-wheel drive with open diffs.
Yeah.
No wonder I didn't make it.
Well, it was funny because when you backed up, she was like, well, what is he going to do? I'm like, he's going to back up and floor it and give it hell.
Yeah.
And sure enough, back. click.
And unfortunately, the video
Zoom.
we have doesn't really show the rooster tail, but I looked in my mirror and I cleaned off some of the trail for Scott.
Yeah. you gave it a nice clean sweep. And it's funny, too, because as you got to the top, and she's like, is that going to happen to us? I said, no. And she's like, how do you know? Like, just watch. Four low, foot to the floor, wah, and just do. Just the way to them all, do, climbed up. And then she's like, you made that look easy. I said, watch, we're going to go into some trees. I'm going to hit something. When we got done wheeling, I looked at her and said, I was really expecting to put one of the fenders in the bed of the truck by the time we were done.
It was tight.
It was tight, but the one area where I saw you
lifted a rear wheel, yeah.
I was like, because that made my what pucker, because I'm sitting here going, oh God, because again, I know it's you and Susan and the Jeep and everything else, and first time out in a couple of years, I'm like, oh man, please no. But Kevin, like a trooper, he just kind of he manipulated it, did what he had to do, and squeaked right on by, and I said, okay, my turn.
And we were on the edge of a ridge that dropped off at the nose. So if you can picture a mountain ridge, it just came out and circled back, and
a tight left-hander with a hill leaning you towards the ridge.
Right, away towards the valley, and a tree with a huge root ball right there. And you could choose to tuck it tight to the tree and swing around, or do a multi-point turn where you're turning left but rolling off to the right, which is a little bit of a pucker factor. So I held it tight. The problem was front wheel went over, no problem. Then I'm turning really hard to the left, pulling the nose around, and the rear end goes up over that tree root mass. And that's when she started to float. And I'm like, ooh, we're right at that point. Oh, I had probably, though, a foot. If she had started to get even looser, I could have made a little bit of a right turn and dropped lower in the groove. But I was like, no, that just feels like I'm sway bar lift as opposed to rollover. If there's a different feel to that, because the rear does have a sway bar on my Jeep, and it will pick up that low tire. And it's like, as soon as I came off the tree mass, it went down back where it belonged, and kept on going. And I'm going, well, how's Scott going to handle it? Well, Scott handled it really like a triple. He swung wide, not tight on the tree.
Well, as wide as I could, because I started getting near the trees. And she's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, hold on. She goes, what do you do if you get nervous? Just do what I do. Close your eyes. What? No, I'm just kidding. But no, and I was really worried I was going to take out that right front fender, because I was like inches away from that little sapling. And I mean sapling, it was about as big as wide as my Crystal Geyser water bottle here.
Well, that was actually where I was watching you and not watching my trail.
Yeah, and here we come to the bullet point of the adventure.
Well, there's a difference between plastic fenders and a steel bumper.
Yeah.
Somebody who goes counter to stubby bumpers and goes a full width reinforced steel ARB. The Jeep stopped suddenly. Boom. Oops.
It's funny. I'm like, why did he stop? Then as he backed up the tree, goes, I'm like, oh, that's why we stopped.
That's what happens. Your eyes forward, not backwards.
And it's funny because here he just kabonged the tree, and as we're going, this is where the previous subject matter comes into play. So we're going through one of these river crossings, and I watch Kevin go down nose, boom,
and the nose goes deep in the water,
and then the back goes boom, and I'm like, okay, here's where I tear off the back bumper.
It wasn't the back bumper.
It wasn't the back bumper. I go down and bang. I'm like, oh.
Imagine, if you will, you couldn't see it, but I can tell you pretty much from the wheel track, there was a groove in the bottom of this water crossing where the water normally ran. Mm-hmm. But the water was so high that it was over the banks, if you want to call it that. So you think you're going down in this nice little U-shaped trough. Nope. There's a V in the bottom.
It's a V in the bottom.
And when you dropped in, that V depth was greater than the distance from Scott's tires to his nose skid plate. So needless to say, the skid plate and the rock made a very... I could hear it all the way up.
Yeah.
I heard this.
El Kabong, and the whole time I'm sitting there going, I'm glad we did the brackets.
Yes. So see last earlier comments.
So as I come down and I go up, and by the way, guys, I have now solved the mystery. 35s will fit in a Gladiator Rubicon with no lift, and you can wheel it.
Yes.
But anyways, so I questions I get asked 10 million times.
Yes.
So as I that one was for you, Corey. So as we're going up the area, I'm like, I'm gonna tear off my back bumper. Thunk, nothing. Oh, thank goodness. I didn't even have clay on the spare tire that was underneath the bumper.
You did. However, when we got up to the venue at the end, you started looking around at the Gladiators, and people who had hitch balls in their Gladiators had lots of vegetation dangling from the hitch balls. So you were right on the edge of what cleared.
Well, it's just funny because, again, no lift, just buzzing through those things. And do you remember the gentleman's name with the 97 TJ that was a 3-pedal Jeep? I don't remember his name.
I don't either. You thought you put it in your phone.
Hold on.
We were following for a fair amount of the trail a gentleman in a 97 TJ with a manual transmission, no lift. Yes, he was actually on some sort of mud and snow tire, and a no,
I didn't save it. I'm sorry.
That's all right. And he actually had something I haven't seen in years. It was a full-size temporary spare on the bunny tail.
Mm-hmm.
You know, limited use only.
Yeah.
No real tread. And he and I guess his wife were in it, and another lady in the back seat with no top on this trail. And it was astounding to watch them, even in the middle where there were parts that got backed up, where they were intersecting trails, and you kind of had to do the New York. Okay, your turn. No, now your turn. Now your turn. Across here, across here.
Yeah.
And he's starting on a hill with a clutch and a stick and a 97 with passengers on street tires, and did just fine.
Yeah, he did great.
And he could maneuver through. Now, you kind of looked every time that he went over an embankment, and I looked, and he gave me the belly shot up the back end. I will admit the gas tank skid plate had seen a fairly significant amount of abuse.
There's a little bit of Georgia Clay in that skid plate.
Yeah, well, a little more than that. There was a few dimples that weren't there in the factory, too. A little bit. He probably didn't hold 14 gallons. He probably holds 12 and a half now.
Yeah.
But no, we met some really outstanding wheelers out there, you know, and notwithstanding my earlier comment about whoever was fumbling with my hubs, everybody we met was fantastic. It was lots and lots and lots and lots of people.
Yeah.
Lots of Jeeps, but the areas were so spread out that you didn't feel like you were, you know, standing in line at a amusement park to get on the roller coaster. You had room to drive and maneuver and make your choices. And occasionally I saw people winching. To say, though, it was a little slippery with the rain, there was one extreme spur off of the venue that came back onto the main trail, but there was no marking on the main trail. And this very same gentleman in the Jeep was in front of us, and we were all queued up, and motion caught my eye to my left.
Oh, yeah.
And uphill.
Yeah.
Way uphill. And I realized what I was seeing was a Jeep coming down the hill, but the wheels weren't turning. The brakes were locked, and he was sliding down. And so I'm looking up there, and I could see his eyes. Yeah, he was probably a good 300 feet up still, coming down, not freewheeling down, not screaming, but, you know, at a pretty steady pace. If he'd hit somebody, he'd have hit them hard. And fortunately, Scott was hanging back a little bit, and I threw my Jeep in reverse and beeped at the guy, and he looks at me, and he starts to pull forward. The other Jeep, I was like, he's not going to make it. And I beeped again. He looked behind me, and I put my arm out the window, pointing up the hill, and kind of bouncing my finger. And he turned, he looked there, and you should have seen him. I'd never seen anybody throw a manual in reverse so fast and spit dirt. And he came right back up on my bumper, which was fine.
Right.
And just about that time, that other Jeep came sliding down with the wheels turned, trying to merge into traffic, and basically went over the trail into the shrubbery on the other side, but finally came to a stop. Mm-hmm. And we met him at the end. He comes over, he says, "Thank you, God." He says, there was nothing I could do. He says, "I'm just coming down the hill and you couldn't see a slot." And he's like, nobody was looking my way. And I even said, "Well," he said, "I'm glad you saw it." I said, "You have a horn?" He goes, "No." I never thought of a horn as trail safety gear, but now it has a purpose.
There was some things I did notice that they're definitely, again, this is just my soapbox for a minute, is when they hand out the flyers when you pick them up, and you get the trail maps and all that, I really think there should be a insert about trail etiquette. About, kind of keeping an eye on people around you, your eyes open. That's
crossing trails,
and stuff like that. But again, they did the best they could. No gladiators. You'll break it. I just
on certain trails, folks. We didn't say no gladiators, but
yeah, but it was kind of fun. But the best part of the day, because at that point we were pretty much the trail started to back up a little bit.
Yeah,
which happens with every event, especially when all the trails aren't open.
Yeah,
and we started to leave, and of course we saw a JK with a hood up.
Yep.
And that was an interesting adventure because, again, no Jeeper left behind. So Kevin and I whip in.
But a lot of people were driving past them, and you could see there were two ladies standing out and two gentlemen bent over, and they were very worried looks on the ladies' faces. And there were actually two Jeeps there. So it wasn't that the one Jeep had been left alone, but you got their information. It
was Dan and Darren. Dan and Darren and their spouses, I believe.
Yeah. And he's like, "I can't put the thing in gear. I was going along here to shift and it's just quit." And I looked at Scott and I said, "Sounds like the classic little snap-in bushing." Mm-hmm. Typically, it's the belly bushing that goes.
Right.
So we got out there and slid underneath, took a look, and nope, that's okay. I said, "Well, it's good and it's bad." I said, "I don't have to lay on the ground anymore, but it's up in your shifter console." And he's like, "Oh, well, yeah. What do I do?" I said, "Well, we're gonna go see what it is, and it's not a problem." I said, "We got to get the shifter handles off," and I left it to him to get the actual shifter handles. It was, and you just have to pull really, really, really hard. There's no set screw, there's no twist. You just kind of wiggle and pull, and it'll eventually work the little spring clip back. And they got them both off, and he says, "So how do we get into the console?" And I said, "Oh, now this one's the same thing. It's a wiggle and pull." He goes, "What?" And we'll go snap. There it is. Okay, we're off. Yep, there it is. Your cable's off. Reached down with a screwdriver and was able to slip it in the eye and shift the thing back into drive. I said, "You want 2-wheel, 4-wheel, or do you?" "Oh, so I can't wheel." I said, "Well, we can try to jerry rig it." I said, "It's going to be definitely a jerry rigging system with some zip ties and
yeah."
But lo and behold, I had a Mickey Mouse clip, courtesy of my step failures kit in my toolbox. I found one that fit over the little groove where the bushing normally snaps, and then used a zip tie to hold the loop with the cable end all the way across the shifter to a little punched hole, which kept the pressure on it.
Right.
And even though it was sloppy, you'd move the shifter a bit before it would get to one eye, and then it shifted in and out all the ranges. Now, he's like, "Oh, can I wheel with this?" And I said, "I wouldn't recommend it. But that's up to you." I said, worst case, you see how I shifted the cable, look at the way this thing moves, and you move the cable to that position with a pair of pliers or, even a strong fingers, and you can do what you want. He said, I'd just go. And we showed him the pictures. We had enough cell signal there. Remember that to actually pull up the part number. So there's the Dorman kit. There it is. Mm-hmm. And I said, that snaps into this and then snaps over that and it stays put.
Yeah.
I said, but this should kind of keep you more or less functional, for a while. And he put the handles back on, left the console cover off, threw it in the back seat, and he's.
You and I both know they went wheeling.
They went wheeling.
Yeah.
Even though we don't recommend you going out with known issues in your transfer case shifter system, but it was kind of fun to do it on the trail repair, not on the trail with the Kevin and Scott, but it was all the above.
It was on the trail with on the trail.
Yeah, and so, but
that's a shirt. Sorry.
So that was one of those fun little things. A little. We weren't technically on the trail. Sorry.
We're on the trailhead.
We're on the trailhead coming in, little access road. So, we could have gotten him out. But long story short, it was one of those, yeah, I know what it is. Yeah, we've done it before.
Well, the whole adventure was good, and unfortunately, the weather
it turned sour.
It turned south.
We'll talk about that on Friday. But
yeah, a couple things that we've done in the past is where like I think we got 1 day of wheeling one time, but the most interesting thing I thought of is that when you're driving a baby Jeep, as I call it now, like you fall into that one category where people, oh my God, I can't believe he made it, like the one guy with the 97. And then sometimes I felt like I was looked at as the trail liability. Here we got a Gladiator that this person probably doesn't know what they're doing. There's no lift and all that, and that's how I felt.
But you know that you have off-road experience.
Right.
You have driven many a mile on trails, and those trails even. So
it was kind of fun to see some like people going like, holy cats, he's making it, and it was funny because the one, the JKU behind me, I saw the frustration in their eyes as I zipped that couple turns, and they're like, back and forth, and I'm like,
yeah, well, that's the thing. The Jeep started out as the nimble, small vehicle. We talk about that, that the Willys all the way through the CJ2A series are essentially the small body Jeeps. And then you start off with the later threes, definitely all the way through the YJs and TJs or the mid bodies. And then you go into the JKs, JTs, JLs, and they're all the big body Jeeps. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with any one of those three whatsoever, but you do have different strengths and different weaknesses,
Yeah.
Mine is very nimble and very, very maneuverable. But it also is a small wheelbase. So going up climbs, I tend to have a lot of weight shift to the rear end because it's not very far.
Yeah.
And the front end can get light. Yours is very stout and keeps that front end planted.
I was so worried I was going to bash that belly pan into submission.
No, you just tried it on the front pan. That's all.
That too, yeah. I could get a quarter of the way there.
So let's continue on with our little synopsis. The next day, rain was in the forecast. And we talked a little bit, and we're like, well, we can run out and hit this venue called Sandy Bottom. And the more I'm looking at the weather, the more I'm like, let's go do the local private trail within the Big Canoe development. And let's go see what that is. It'll be less crowded, and we'll be able to take our time a little more. May not be anybody else on there. Yeah. There was one set of tire tracks, folks. We were the only ones on it, which was great. It's only about a 2-mile run, if that. It's a little under 2. But we went down and we found the location. It's more of a struggle trying to find the entrance. It's kind of hidden. Yeah. And we found it, got on the trail. It was like, oh, this is nice. There was one set of tire tracks, a couple of people out hiking the area. And but we could see that the weeks of rain preceding this event had really done a number on that trail. Normally, I would actually class that trail as easy, even by Florida standards, with only a moderate, if even moderate, exit at the end where you kind of make a hard left turn and a right turn, and you go up kind of the side of a little shale breakout of rock to get up back onto the road. And we're down there, and it's like, the one water crossing. Normally there's one, on, I forget the creek name down there, but anyway.
And near the cabin.
But near a cabin that's been reconstructed like an old settler's cabin or hunter's cabin, more hunters, not settlers. And there used to be a shelf rock. Well, the shelf rock was down the hill a little bit from before. And what was left was a base rock that was tilted, and there was really no security guard for you going with it over the edge. And the slight challenge is as you approach the end of it, once you're coming through the water, it's a hard left turn to get back up on the trail, climbing as you go. So now your front's lifting and twisting to the right while your rear end's still twisting to the left. It put a little bit of twist on the Jeeps, a little different, raised the pucker factor slightly. I'm not saying hugely, but fortunately it was not slick rock. It was a granite boulder, and so even though there's water running on it, it held on pretty good. A lot of the trail surfaces had been severely washed and were really broken and rugged. And Scott definitely had the better of it with the long wheelbase.
Oh, yeah.
Because Sue and I were sitting there doing the ping pong ball and the mason jar thing. Bunga, 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 bunga.
Are you talking about the stone area?
Huh?
Where they put the stone washboard down?
Well, no, that was what they did to cover over one area. They put some gravel down, but the rest of it was just all what I call edge rock, where a rock strata is tipped up and coming out of the ground at an angle, and then it's broken and weathered, and all the dirt that cushioned everything was washed away. And so, yeah, we were rocking from right to left, forward to aft, and just clunking along. We did fine, but it still was a little bit rough. Then we got up by the still, and we wanted to stop for what's called the lower falls, but the pull-off area was gone.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether it was marked that it was still there, so I don't think it was closed. I just think Mother Nature had gone, not today. Mm-hmm. Got on up to the upper parking level for the top of the falls. And it's not a huge falls. It's probably, a 20-footer drop, something like that. It was nice, but you can go into that parking area, but obviously the water had been so high at times that it had left the creek bank and had come to the middle of the parking area because it was a pretty deep water wash, not flowing at that time. So you had to turn around in a wash and then back up the hill to park so that you could go back out the way you came in. All in all, it was a lot of fun.
It was.
And it was definitely way more challenging than any other year I've ever been there.
No, it actually is. It's funny because I told my compadre, I said, these are super easy. And then like halfway through that stone area and all that, she's like, this is easy. I'm like, yeah, it's been a little washed out. Yeah,
well, there were 7 water crossings. Normally there's 1, okay, because the creeks were still running pretty strong. And some of them were just small little splush, 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 splush. And other ones were like, I went in one of the ones that was a little bit larger and a little bit darker brown from the water off. And as I went, the front planted well with the weight of that cast iron 6 in there. Mm-hmm. But when the rear end came in and the front went up, you could feel the rear end doing the old water dance to the downstream side every time.
Yeah. Oh, that was one of the cool areas on the venue where it was when you came out of one of the river crossings and you got sideways. Part of the thing is like, we've been so busy getting everything, I haven't had a chance to go through the video footage. I did on a couple of them, but Kevin was actually going sideways up the hill where the Jeep kind of like crosses on the wheel ruts, and you were going sideways. That was a cool moment. I hope it's on video. So
yeah, hopefully your batteries lasted. We may have to rig up a long portable cable for power to those.
Well, they have the endurance batteries, which I'm going to look into getting.
Yeah, well, so at that point, though, as we were coming up, my co-driver and other side of the financial department, my wife Susan, was I don't think we want to do Sandy Bottom. No, I don't think we can do Sandy Bottom. So I'm like, why? I said, is it the rain? Because it was raining on us even. Mm-hmm. And she said, Sandy Bottom's closed due to damaged and stuck Jeeps clogging every single trail. Yes. This was 10:30 in the morning.
And they had upgraded to mud terrain tires and a winch.
And a winch mandatory.
And people were still getting stuck.
So we came out of our little private trail, which was nice because we actually did come out of the trail as opposed to everybody sitting on Sandy Bottom for hours till they, because you have to clear them one at a time to get people to move forward. Then somebody else gets stuck in the way. So we didn't get to do Sandy Bottom this year. I've done it other years. It's a neat trail. It's a lot of fun. But, it's a moderate, even in their times. There's some challenges down there, and you can bog in. And considering the amount of water, I'm sure there were quite a few bogged in. Mm-hmm. So then we did some alternate stuff. We hopped in the Jeeps, and we headed over to a little town in Georgia called Dahlonega. Mm-hmm. And Dahlonega is a... what do I want to call it? Craft arts haven and antique/junk. Yeah. Spelled Junque.
Nice.
And we cruised on over to Dahlonega and wandered around a little bit in and around in between rain showers and did a little shopping, a little eating. Had a dinner at the Shenanigans Irish eatery, yeah. And
nothing says mountain rustic living like a Shenanigans bar.
Yeah. Oh, we did miss the other trip that we made the other day. Was it? That would have been
Anamacola Falls.
No. Well, yeah. I was going to say that was Thursday, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah. And then
Thursday or Friday. Which one did we go to the falls? Regardless, one of those days, folks. It's a blur at this point. We had some time to kill. It was after we did the 2 trails and still had some time. So we went over and stopped at Amalacola Falls, which is an awesome spot in Georgia. Nice, huge waterfall. I forget how many, 1,200 steps or 1,600 steps if you want to walk it. Yeah. I prefer to burn a little gasoline and drive to the top. Did the overlook at the visitor center at the top, and then came back down. And then one of the 2 days we broke out some time. Scott wanted to go to Helen, Georgia, which is a Bavarian themed town in the mountains of Georgia. And we went up there and had lunch at a Germanish bistro sitting on the, I'm trying to remember what the rivers.
Yeah, it was on a river. But the interesting part is I almost died because I had some flatline hot sauce on an empty stomach. Now, the mouth burn wasn't the problem.
Oh, that was from Dahlonega at no, that was Helen.
No, that was Helen.
Helen at the some name of the store
Pepper
was
Palace.
Pepper Palace.
But you had to sign a waiver. It was the hottest stuff they had called flatline. I'm like, I'll try it. And again, the mouth burn, I powered right through. It didn't really burn. I mean, it tingled, but didn't really burn. Everyone's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like,
no nerve
fine.
left.
No nerve. And the one kid that did it before me, he was in bad shape. And I'm like, yeah, it's fine, but then this hot sauce, because they don't give you anything to eat with it. You're just licking it off a spoon.
Yeah, not even a cracker.
Not even a cracker. And so I'm sitting there going, all right. And then all of a sudden, as we're sitting out there,
his stomach says, "You effed with me, I'm effing back."
Dude, let me tell you something, man. Like when that hot sauce hits your belly and your belly's empty, oof.
kind of like
I was sweating. I was bent over. I was sitting on a rock. Forget the hemorrhoids the rock gave me. But I'm sitting there, and and Autumn's her name. She handed me her sweater, like, mop yourself up, boy. You're sweating. And I'm like, I know. She's worried about me, and I'm mopping up the sweat off my head. Kevin's over there by the river with all the locks on the fence. And we sat down, and I was like, "You okay?" I'm like, "No, I'm not. I almost died."
All I had was the inside of your stomach. Probably looked like putting paint stripper on a hot black hood in the sun.
It was
crinkle.
It was bad, but I powered through it. It was a classic. Gonna be dumb, gotta be tough. But no, I like those little things. Like jeeping is cool and the trailing is great and all that. But what keeps these things popular with the locals and the infrastructure in the cities is you go and you spend money in the town.
Yeah,
you're giving back to that community. So that's why everyone had a welcome Jeeper sign. No one had to go away.
Yeah. So, but at that point with the rain and everything else, you guys decided to pull chocks a day early.
Well, we did because it's a lot of time in the car and a few other things. But we just wanted to get home a little bit, and it sucks because we could have gone to the show afterwards because we've been trying to reach Rick at Jeepers Den.
Yep,
but
which I did.
You did.
So I'm going to take over here, guys. Susan and I got up Sunday morning, and at that point, virtually those trails that were open were all kind of labeled with a black skull and crossbones,
Yeah, I think they shut everything down by noon.
Yeah, it was sliding. So we went on to the actual event center, which is there off of Tate Road, and the Jasper Jeep Fest location. It's actually on Google Maps now as a point. And in between rain showers, we're walking along, watching people in the obstacle course area / destroy your Jeep for free.
Yeah,
it was close. We also met a lot of vendors, and I'll get to that in a minute. The obstacle course was interesting because it was nothing abnormal. I'm sure if you've been to any Jeep events, you've seen these dirt humps, and they have
normal.
Yeah, they have twisty areas, and then they have up and down areas, and then they had a mud pit to try and bog your way through, and they had hill climbs. Well, it's all made with red Georgia clay, and you add water, and it throws it into an utter chaos. I watched a JK up on the very simple, I usually call them camelbacks, where you go hump to hump to hump to hump. You're just going up and down, up and down. And they slid off that over into a frame twister and then couldn't get back out. Unfortunately, somebody came in on an obstacle course with a winch to winch a Jeep off an obstacle course.
Ouch.
We watched somebody go up the mud hill. Several people tried to go up the hill and not make it and slid back down. But one person did it successfully. The problem was they slid down the other side.
Oh, no.
And they didn't roll, thank heavens, but they came down, and as they were sliding, they kept turning sideways. And when they got to the bottom, they were crosswise to the trail and tipped up on 2 wheels and then thump, back down on their wheels. And, of course, everybody's standing there with that momentary, oh, you know what,
Yeah.
this is a family show. And then they hit the, I survived, and hey!
Yay.
Yeah. By the way, thank God the seat's already wet, right?
Exactly.
From the rain. Another person took a JK, it was a 2-door JK into the mud pit. And thinking that she would be smart, she decided she'd hang up and side hill it a little bit on the edge on the one side. And then missed the fact that the center had a deep sippy hole in the middle. So what I call it down here from the type of thing, that deep spot they set in the middle of a trail just to get you. And so she only dropped her driver's left front tire in the sippy hole with the whole rest of the Jeep up on the bank. And she got herself to tipping point, but didn't quite go over. I give her credit. She caught it, but then it stalled. And she sat there, and then they tried to get her out, and they tried to pull her out. And every time they pulled her, she'd lean further. And they finally brought a backhoe over, and he tried for a while, and she kept leaning further. And finally, the backhoe driver said, I'm not going to do this. And so somebody else with more backhoe skill came out and said, okay, rig it this way, rig it that way. And he pulled her backwards out while keeping the backhoe bucket in such a way that it would not let the Jeep roll over. In other words, on the left hook, they put it on the left toe hooks on the rear and pulled both kind of backwards and a little bit uphill, holding the bucket low. So when the Jeep tried to roll over, that strap held the back right down.
Right. Yeah, I got you.
It was quite an engineering effort. They finally got it out. But then the funniest thing was when the guy who wasn't the owner who rode it back out, the event had somebody else in there rather than the owner in case it did roll over. And they opened the door, and Mississippi mud pie just came out of the inside. It was over the door thills. And when we left, the poor lady was in there with a cup, plastic drink cup, blort. And when I left, she was still sitting there, and the Jeep was not running. So this event, because of the water and people kind of driving above their skill level, probably cost quite a few people some issues there. On the other hand, on the more pleasant side, I want to give a shout out to a couple of folks. Number one, I had a long chat with while we were watching the person in the Jeep,
Right.
from Blake Singer of Red Clay Off-Road. He's the owner of a relatively new startup Jeep center. It's a Red Clay Off-Road at gmail.com, and he's in Newnan, that's Newnan, Newnan, Georgia. And they have a shop that they have opened up with some guys that know what they're doing and works on Jeeps and all trucks, doing lift kits, leveling kits, wheels, tires, engine swaps, fab. So if you're in the area around Newnan, Georgia, looking to find a shop that maybe could give you a hand, give Blake a call. Ask him. He seemed like a really knowledgeable guy. We talked a lot. He asked me a couple of questions, and we had a good discussion. So thanks, Blake, for giving me some time. There was another couple of folks that were really, I can't not give them a shout out. Scott's doing not so selfies over his shoulder to me. To Jason and Sabrina Anderson. They have a small business. They operate out of a trailer at these events. And it's called Patriot Customs with a Z, Customz. And they're a laser engraving firm.
Sweet.
And they do it right there while you wait.
Nice.
They have the laser set up in the trailer, cups, mugs, anything that they come in pre-finished. And the lasering is different than a lot of the different processes that I've seen because the precision and fine lines do incredible graphics. And they've got it tuned so that it removes, like my wife wanted this. She's got a cow theme going.
Right.
And she wanted a mug, and it was a cow wearing a floral bouquet on its head. It's kind of a thing right now in the country
Gotcha.
stuff. And you're looking at this, it's on a small mug that's only about 3 inches in diameter, and the lines look like they were etched with a fine line pen. No burning, no scarring. It's just perfectly cut. And we may look into them for some OTT stuff. We'll just leave it at that for now. But again, Sabrina was really nice, was very supportive. My wife could pick any color mug. She could pick anything. And the price of that custom mug, or not mug, it's kind of like a cold drink Yeti, you know what I'm talking about, that kind of thing, was no different than what you'd pay for it in a store.
Nice.
But it's custom engraved. And then the last one I'm going to give a shout out to is, of course, I'm walking around there and Jeepers Den. Somebody Scott's been trying to get a hold of. And lo and behold, Jeepers Den, if you're in the Southeast, you know Jeepers Den. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
They're one of those locally owned Jeep parts and accessories companies.
Yep.
Truck accessories. They're not part of a big chain. And I mean, they've got 3 locations right now in Lakeland, Florida, which is near here, Orlando, which is where their base is, and down in Puerto Rico, for those down there in Puerto Rico who want to go wheeling. And lo and behold, who am I talking to? Ricky Artis, the owner president. And we're going to get Ricky on the show. Ricky was interested in being on the show. So, and Scott's going, I've been trying to get a hold of him for a year. And it's like, well, here's his business card, boss.
Not for a year, more like 3 months.
3 months. Okay. But Ricky, thanks again for chatting with me. It was nice having just sitting out there, 2 Jeep guys kibitzing as we watched crazy people in the obstacle course sliding through the mud.
Spending money,
and all kinds of fun things like that. And there were a host of other Jeep vendors out there. You know, the big boys were all there as well. All in all, it made for a really nice wrap up. And unlike Scott, I still have plenty of mud.
Well, so do I. I got the Gladiator clean, but inside the fender wells needed some work, so I got a bumper brush.
Okay.
Stick.
Okay, well, that'll work. That'll be work. And, you know, I've already talked about, there really is, for this show, I don't think we're going to have much of a garage segment. We kind of wove it into everything else there. You know, what was my big thing is getting my steps fixed with the proper bushings.
Yep.
I will go back in now, take them off again, not because they're broken, but 8 years up and down repeatedly, bashing into rocks and everything else. And they're still there. They're still functioning, but the bushings are worn out. We knew that when we overhauled them this past spring. I didn't have a source for these plastic sleeve bushings with a flange on it. I now have them. So I'm going to go back in each one of them, clean them up, replace all the bushings, probably go get, well, no, I did. I bought a new pack of 1/4-inch C-clips or Mickey Mouse clips, and I'm going to replace all those because they get strained and stretched. And that should tighten everything back up again, back to getting rid of the slop in the play that's letting them droop a little bit.
Yeah.
As well as making them a little quieter. And, you know, maybe I'll get another 8 years out of them. I have to clean up. I'm going to go through things. I do want to go and open my front diff cover up as a post-run check between the highway miles and then that incident on the trail climb where somebody unlocked my hub. I'm going to pull that hub off, check it to make sure nothing's cracked or broken, and then check the differential out to make sure that it didn't get chewed up, you know, with that unbalanced power application.
Right.
Didn't seem to, you know, for the tow home or the, you know, in the driving around here, but better check it than use it next time and have it fail.
An ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So, we're going to move on into other garage stuff. Like, I want to make an update, not to my Mastercraft seats, but to the kit that it came with for operating your tilt function on the seat brackets. It works. I can't argue with that, but it's kind of kludgy. The cable's getting kinked. That was the old cable. It's not the kit's fault, but I think I have a little bit better idea. And knowing folks like Shane and Mel, who have a subsection of Gulf Coast Drive Shafts that does cables, all kinds of cables. I am going to have a properly sized cable made, and I'm going to try for a different, what do I want to call it? A different venue for locking and unlocking the tilt function on those seats to maybe be a little easier.
You got an idea. Besides, we're going to need to fab something up for my seats, too, because my seats are rocketing towards a year thing, as it is.
Seems to be a theme with you.
But this time is not my fault, which I do actually, just in case I didn't send any emails saying I have to go check my P.O. box to see if that's...
Oh, yeah, you do. So
but one of the other things I do want to check on, if you guys have any, I know you if you've been on any jail or Gladiator forum, you know what I'm talking about, the Clean Sweep Performance Jeep wiper blades.
Yep.
Everyone sees $140 and has kittens. They are not that cheap, but you can find them a little cheaper. But what they are is a wiper blade system, kind of like what Volvo has.
Well, it's more than the wiper blades.
Yes,
it's the wiper arm assembly all the way up to the head frame, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the actual the arm is the same, but it's the blade itself,
the blade frame,
the blade frame, yeah, and that has nozzles in it that squirt right onto the windshield,
right. So instead of it shooting up and the only problem I think Scott's going to have with it is that it's always going to hit the windshield, and he likes to use his squirters when people tailgate him.
I know. That was one of the comments made in the Gladiator forum today. Like, well, it's really cool. I really do like it, especially for love bugs here in Florida. But what sucks is I can't get the guy behind me tailgating me. I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, well, we can rig something up for that.
No rocket launchers.
Oh no, I was just talking about a separate valve, a little button that you push that squirted washer fluid straight over top in a direct stream.
I got a Jeep, I just fold the soft top back and throw a big gulp cup at him. I'm joking.
Yeah.
I'm joking. I'm not 21 years old anymore in my other car. But no, the point is that, again, I do not condone that, people. I'm joking. But no, again, let tailgaters tailgate.
Yeah.
But so I'm on the fence about that. I have a lot of other things I could use that money for right now, because it's just one of those kind of things that intrigues me, because I know Mattson talked about it on his show.
Yep.
And it is like wildfire on the Gladiator forums. It's polarizing. Either you love it or you hate it. Kind of like Jeeps themselves, you know. Either it's the new Gladiator and it sucks, or it should have stopped with the TJ because the TJ is the last real Jeep.
Oh, for God's sakes.
Yeah. So again, it doesn't matter who you talk to, but it's a polarizing topic. But on that note, anything else you want to cover?
No, I think we're in good shape here, folks. I will thank you to all of you who followed us on Facebook, who asked questions, those that were up there with us. It was awesome at both events. Ed, again, another shout out to you. It was fun running into you in Tennessee. The fact that you guys showed so much interest to the Facebook snapshots and pictures, we'll probably, as Scott has said, probably add a little more of those as time goes on. But remember that we're primarily a podcast. We're for listening enjoyment, particularly those of you who've told us that we are either while you're driving your truck or for business or you're commuting to and from work. We don't plan on going anywhere.
Or mowing the lawn. I get that a lot too.
Yeah.
I usually mow my lawn. I'm like, thanks.
Hey, it works for us.
Absolutely.
Anything you want. Again, if you, Mr. Listener, Ms. Listener kids, have a subject that you'd like for us to visit, please email us at
onthetrailpodcast@gmail.com or send us a Facebook message.
That
Carrier
works
pigeon.
really good.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, but they'd have to find us, the carrier pigeons, particularly around here.
Meanwhile, the cats are going, vegetables. Wait, why did I say vegetables?
I have no idea.
Don't have to feed the cat. Why is there a suitcase, a tiny doll suitcase?
Yeah, exactly.
That was the letter.
So,
meanwhile, Zion's in the corner. Brr.
Yeah, well, actually, it's probably going to be Juno more than Zaya.
Oh, yeah, that too.
Zaya's the city kitty.
Juno's the hardened.
She lived outside for many years. The feral who has been, I'm not going to say tamed. That's not, but she has joined the family on her terms.
Juno has accepted her new servants.
Yes.
And a very nice, litter box changers and food providers. But other than that, life is good.
All right. Well, folks, again, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the follow-up on these two wheeling adventures. As we get back to normal, we are looking to continue on. Like I said, we're going to have a nice chat with the folks from last show up at Winrock.
Yep.
And we're going to make some plans, maybe this year, maybe not, probably next year. We were going all the way up to Pennsylvania to go to the Bantam Jeep Festival. Want to see the Origin, and plus for me, I spent a lot of my young years up in Pennsylvania running around the mountainsides. Unfortunately, it wasn't in a Jeep. Mom wouldn't let me have a Jeep at that time. She was too worried about it being, a route
unsafe at any speed.
Yes, but I did it in quite a few other things, like a Bronco 2, Dodge Dakota pickup truck, a Chevy C10. That was probably the one that I did the most damage with, and a few other vehicles of indeterminate origin that came together after a scrapyard and a welder and a couple of crazy guys.
Meanwhile, while jumping a ravine,
Pretty much. Pretty much. The landing on the other end was bizarre, and I'll just make that comment that she wouldn't turn right right anymore. All she'd do was turn left after that jump.
All right. So the NASCAR conversion was a success.
So we ended up, to get it back to the house to fix it, I wasn't driving. I had the truck, and I was following the gentleman driving, who remained unmentioned, undernamed, is that he came to the right turn and just did a 270 donut to make the right turn.
Nice.
To the left. And we got there, and then the way we did a precision front-end alignment to restore it by chaining the back frame on the passenger side to a fence post outside of my barn, and then took my old Farmall tractor and hooked it to the front arm assembly and just started going boom, boom. And finally he said, "I think you got the best you're going to get." And I looked back, and the entire passenger side of the car was hanging in the mid-air on the tension of the line. And meanwhile, the tractor's sitting there going, digging ditches in the ground. That was true four-wheeling and fun.
And this has been another episode of Wheeling with Kevin and Fixing with Tractors. Join us next time as he does brain surgery.
Yeah, do you think the 4-foot forks on the
with
loader arm will do it?
Yeah, exactly.
Scott doesn't know. I've got a nice diesel tractor sitting out in a barn out back.
I do know it. I've watched you play with it. All right, kids, we do have to get it. It's time we lock the hub, put the Jeep in 4 low, and hit the trail. And also remember never to always to take nothing but memories, pictures, and your trash when you leave the trail. Almost flubbed that.
Yeah. Because we do want to keep them open for our children and our children's children,
Exactly.
As well as, be nice when you go back the next time.
Yay.
So with that, we will see you in 2 more weeks.
Yep.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Proceeding has been provided for entertainment only. Proper service and repair procedures are vital to the safe, reliable operation of all motor vehicles, as well as personal safety of those performing those repairs. Standard safety procedures and precaution, including the use of safety goggles and proper tools and equipment, should be followed at all times to eliminate the possibility of personal injury or improper service which could damage the vehicle or compromise its safety.
What he said. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. You guys have a great day.
Bye.
This has been a Bent Axle Media production.